Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Alpha One Canada's Virtual Patient Education Summit Ask the Patients webinar. Here you'll be able to listen to a panel of panelists. That sounds kind of funny, doesn't it? Panel of panelists who will share their experiences, challenges, and life lessons with Alpha One antitrypsin deficiency. My name is Jim Mundy, and I'll be your moderator for this session. Okay, so here are today's panelists. We have Allison, who doesn't have a webcam, or at least doesn't have a webcam that we were able to get to show. So we're just going to hear Allison's voice. We also have Andrew, as well as Ed, Ken, Mark, and Tom.
My name is Allison Glassford. I am the eldest of three girls born in North Bay, Ontario, and I grew up in the western part of Canada. My heritage is mainly Scottish and English, and Scandinavian, American, and Canadian. I'm a mixed bag of a Canadian.
Muted.
Both of my parents were carriers. As a young girl, I remember getting short of breath and really tired after any sports. I always thought I was just lazy or that I needed to work harder. Eventually, I avoided strenuous sports altogether. In 1967, I married and lived in Calgary for 23 years. And during that time, I had a daughter and owned my own business. After the birth of my daughter, I started to develop bronchitis frequently and struggled to breathe. At 27, I had my first pulmonary function, and the diagnosis was severe asthma. I was prescribed Ventolin and tried to understand what that meant. I started becoming short of breath just walking up hills, and my doctor, though thought I should work out more. I did this, and it did not help. Around 1984, I had another pulmonary function, which showed severe COPD. I was sent to a specialist who prescribed Theophylline, and it turned out I was allergic to it. Then I was told maybe it was all stress. No one had an answer. All I knew, I could not breathe really well after any exertion. Sorry, excuse me. My younger sister, Pauline, had her second child in 1989, and she started to feel short of breath, and we both had the same doctor. So after her pulmonary function came back with severe COPD, the blood test itself was in Canada, so Pauline had the blood test first, and she was diagnosed with alpha-1. So then my doctor said I should have it too, and sure enough, I was diagnosed. So that was 1989. The frustrating thing was nobody knew anything about it, like nobody, and we did not have computers, so we had to read about it, and there wasn't that much information at all. All I knew was that it was rare, it was hereditary, and as one doctor said, it's probably going to kill me before I'm 55. In 1990, I changed my life, left Calgary, moved back to Vancouver, and I have since learned that sea level is best. I went to naturopaths and learned to eat properly, started working out, basically took better care of myself, saw a therapist for 8 years, and I learned how to meditate. I found a doctor that cared and researched alpha-1, and he found Prolastin. This was in 1991. It was new and not proven to work, and it took lots of letters to the government, and I got approval, basically to be a guinea pig. I started taking it once a month and then every 2 weeks. Then I found Dr. Abood. Thank God for Dr. Abood. He knew something about it, and he was researching alpha-1. So he saw me for probably about 5 years. Through the many tests, it showed that once a week is the best way to have the infusion. So I have been taking Prolastin for 25 years. In 2006, I caught a rare virus and went into respiratory failure, which required prolonged hospital care and took a long time to recover. And in 2013, I was struck again and went into respiratory failure again. I try to stay away from germs, which I'm sure all of us know. And today, I am 68 years old. I work out, I try to walk as much as I can, and I'm on oxygen 24/7. Otherwise, I live a normal life. Thank you.
So I'm not as well prepared as Allison, and this is all very new to me. I was diagnosed on March 6th of last year. Had been leading a pretty active life, coaching my kids in hockey and so on, and just kind of felt like, you know, I couldn't keep up with them in the drills anymore. And so I started getting, I thought it was my heart because my heart was racing. Anyway, I got stress tests, and I guess this probably goes back to 2012 or maybe even 2010 when I started to, I think my doctor gave me some, like a puffer for asthma. Anyway, out of the stress test, it became pretty obvious that right away that it was a lung issue. And so I went here in Barrie, Ontario, went to the hospital's asthma clinic, and there's a pretty sharp doctor there, not my family doctor. Actually, my family doctor was great, sending me to the asthma doctor, and the asthma doctor recommended the blood test. So anyway, I got the news in March of last year, and between then and September was when I got approved for Prolastin. So I've been on Prolastin for about, I don't know, 8 months or so. I've had a lung function test that actually showed an improvement. So I'm borderline COPD. I thought originally I was mild COPD, but because they put me on Spiriva at the same time as they put me on Prolastin, my lung function actually improved. So I'm waiting for my next lung function test to see if the Prolastin's kind of holding the line, and that's my story.
My name's Ed Spears. I live in Elmira, which is in Ontario, about 130 kilometers west of Toronto. I was diagnosed with alpha-1 in '97. However, like Allison, I was no good at sports from when I was a kid. I couldn't keep up. I couldn't breathe well enough, and yeah, I was told many times, you're just not working hard enough. You need to be in shape and things, and so I can identify with that. I realized when I was by the time I was in my late 20s, early 30s, that I had an issue, and I had a brother who also was having major problems. I was fortunate that he was more deteriorated than I was. My first PFT was done because I had worked at a particular factory. I was sent a notice by the Department of Labor that I had to turn up for a breathing test, and it was, I didn't think much of it at the time, but I did, and the fella tested me, I don't know, 3 or 4 times that day, and he kept doing it over again, and finally he said, well, I guess this is the result. She said, you have the lungs of a 95-year-old smoker. I was 30 at the time, and I was completely, I thought he was just out of his mind. Anyway, he said, I'm going to send this to your doctor because you should do something about it. So I never heard any more about it. I never thought very much more about it. But my brother was deteriorating quite quickly, and eventually you have to face the reality of that something isn't quite right. My brother was diagnosed probably 94 maybe with alpha-1 after many years of many doctors and many years of trying to get to the root of the problem of what was going on. And I didn't want to be tested at that particular time. I guess I was in denial, and I waited until 1997, and I could go to my doctor and tell him, you need to test me for this particular thing. He'd never heard of it, and I had to spell it for him, and he got results back and said, yeah, well, that's a problem. I'm sending you to this respirologist, which was a wonderful thing. Dr. Jackson has been a tremendous blessing, although the first time I saw her, she said, yes, you have alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. We don't have any treatment. This will you'll slowly deteriorate. You won't be able to breathe, and you'll die from this. You probably, average mortality is about 60 years old. It was real. I remember it so distinctly because it was so negative, and it was there was no hope in the diagnosis at all. She did mention that there was this was in 1997, so Prolastin had been around for a while. However, it wasn't approved by the Canadian Thoracic Society, so they weren't prescribing at that point, and she wasn't involved in any trials or tests, and it was very expensive, and they couldn't justify the cost. So I went home and tried to ignore it all. Continued doing what I was doing and working, and I had regular appointments with her. By that time, my lung function was something below 50%, but I was able to do what I could do and maintain my job at that time. It wasn't very long before I was having more and more trouble, and in 2000 I was prescribed oxygen for exercise, and they tried to, I got together with a physiotherapist, and we worked on exercise programs to get me more fit, so that it would be easier to do things and keep my job. My doctor at the same time was saying, well, it was time for me to start thinking about her writing a letter to my employer saying that I could no longer perform my work, which I didn't really want to do. Everything changed in September 2001 when I was put off on disability. By then, I was on oxygen pretty much all the time. Yeah. For anything, and I appreciated the oxygen so that I could actually get things done. So I was retired in 2001, and I was 46 years old. And it was a very difficult thing to accept at the time. But I kept busy, and my wife and I kind of changed roles. She went to work, and I started looking after the house. So it was a learning time for us both, and been very challenging. And anyway, I've learned to cook much better than then. And so far, I haven't made either of us sick. So we've had a lot of ups and downs. In 2001, late in the year, there was a meeting in Toronto about whether there should be an Alpha-1 Canada Association. And from that, we kind of followed through, and I became one of the committee members that formed the association and went on to incorporate and receive the charitable organization status. And by 2007, I was really not able to keep up with that or much of anything else that I was doing. I had a further and further dependence on oxygen. Although I was still able to work around the house and keep things going, I was deteriorating. I had started Prolastin in 2000 in May, and but my lung function continued to deteriorate, although we feel at a much slower level. With the Prolastin, I had much fewer exacerbations, a lot fewer infections and colds and bronchitis and things. But there was still some. And by, let's see, it was about 2011, we started talking about transplant. My brother had gone through a lung transplant in 2002, and he had a mediocre outcome, shall we say. It gave him an extra 6 years of life that he wouldn't have had with his family, and that were very important years for his family. Anyway, I was put on the list in the fall of 2011, listed for a double lung transplant in Toronto. And I waited 11 months, and in October of 2012, I received 2 new lungs. my outcome has been really good. My breathing tests, immediately before the transplant, I was running a little under 10% function. And my most recent one now is 132%. So my outcome has been really tremendous. I've been very blessed. And I've been able to, after a couple of years of hard work and building muscle and getting back to where I could actually manage to do things, I've been able to return to kind of most of my normal activities. And I guess that about covers it for me.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Good morning, everyone. I live in the little town called Dresden in southwestern Ontario, home of Uncle Tom's Cabin. It's about halfway between Windsor and London. I was diagnosed with lung-affected alpha-1 in April of 2008. Up until that point, I'd been extremely active with sports, golf, curling, walking. And my wife always wanted to know why I had to breathe so heavily when we were doing a fast walk. And I said, I don't know, I just do. And I went to the doctor to question it, and he did the usual stress tests. And I decided to go to the gym a little more, get in better shape, and went back to see him 2 years later because I was no better. And he sent me to respirologist Dr. McCormick in London, Ontario. Dr. McCormick figured out what it was right away. It was alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. We applied for augmentation therapy with the Ontario government, but was denied because they said the drug prolastin was under review. So went online, found out that Dr. Chapman in Toronto at Toronto Western Hospital had a augmentation therapy trial. I applied, was accepted with the CSL Behring's product called Zimera. So I joined that trial in 2009. It was a double-blind trial. So for 2 years I did not know what I was on. And then the drug company was kind enough to complimentary supply a further 2 years of augmentation therapy after the trial was completed. I found out some time ago that I had in fact been on the drug Zimera. When I entered the trial back in 2009, my FEV1 was about 62.3%. When I completed the the augmentation therapy 4 years later, my FEV1 was 60%. So from a statistical point of view, my lungs had held stable for the 4 years while I was on augmentation therapy.
Unmuted.
I went in 6 months with no treatment after that was done. And fortunately for me, my wife's employer changed private healthcare providers. And so now I'm on Prolastin C with the private healthcare providing some of a partial cost of the drug. I do exercise regularly, either at home or at the gym, but I use supplementary oxygen so that I can maintain my oxygen level above 90%. And I bought myself a little pulse oximeter at the drugstore in Michigan for about $100, and that's how I monitor what my oxygen level is when I'm exercising. I try to maintain a healthy weight because it doesn't take very many extra pounds to make it a lot more difficult to breathe. Spend a lot of time educating and learning about the disease so that I can understand and know enough, hopefully, to ask my health providers, health people questions and understand their answers that they give me. I subscribe to an email called COPD News of the Day. It's free, and there's quite a few good links there where you can read other articles. There are other medical journals that you can access. And fortunately for me, oldest daughter works at Oregon State University, so she has access to a considerable volume of research articles that she has forwarded to me. I'm certainly some great deal of concern with the disease, particularly with the lack of funding for augmentation therapy in Ontario. And on top of that, there seems to be zero political and bureaucratic willingness to fund augmentation therapy. It's also somewhat concerning that other treatments that are in the pipeline take such a long time to develop. But on the other hand, I've been very fortunate. I'm pretty stable lungs. I'm still leading an active lifestyle. And I think that's about all my story.
Yeah, I did everything wrong. I was a heavy smoker. Although I was active, I played a lot of hockey and in my 20s and early 30s, but could never quite go the distance that everybody else could. And I can remember one time in my 30s carrying a heavy piece of equipment with another fellow and having to say, I got to put this down. I got to get my breath here. And just thinking that I was, boy, am I ever out of shape. I've got to get some more exercise. I was burning the candle at both ends and smoking. And, I'd worked in a dusty gravel pit. I worked in smoky bars. Like, what else could we do? Not knowing that Alpha-1 was lurking in there. And it just, I finally got so sick at one point, and this would have been, let's say, 18 years ago, coughing my guts out, and then light a cigarette. Boy, that's smart. So I quit smoking at that point. I knew something was wrong, and I didn't see the point in going to a doctor complaining of a lung problem while I'm smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. What's the first thing that's going to come out of his mouth? So I quit smoking for 2 years. Most of the coughing went away. The shortness of breath didn't. And at that point, I started to see doctors to find out what was wrong, and was diagnosed with Alpha-1. At that point, my lung function wasn't too bad. I don't know what the numbers were, but I was still working and carrying on my life. But was told that I would eventually need a double lung transplant. So I carried on with my life. Eventually, I had to use oxygen 24/7. I eventually sold my business because the health concerns were one of the reasons, and toured all over Mexico with an oxygen bottle slung over my shoulder. Spent about 8 winters down there being as active as I could be, knowing that this transplant was coming at some point. Then finally, I did get accepted to the list, and it'd be 3 years in September. I was just right before Ed. I remember leaving the hospital after my transplant and watching Ed. He had just had his, and walking down the hall with one of those walkers, and I looked at him, "How you doing, Ed?" And he said, "I feel like crap." So anyway, I got the double lung transplant in September 2012, and it hasn't been without complications. But I'll tell you, I would do it again. It is. I have a life now. I ride my bike. I skate. I'm in my gardens all the time. I picked up my music career again. I can sing again. I couldn't sing. I couldn't even play my guitar. I was at the point I was so sick that I couldn't press the strings down. hard enough to play the guitar, and to strum the guitar, I would be out of breath. And now I have a CD, and I'm performing, and like I say, all these activities that I can do now with this lung transplant. Interestingly, my sister has alpha-1 as well. She's only 2 years younger than I am. She never smoked. She says she smoked a little bit in high school, and I don't know how significant that is. But it was just a very short period of time, and she hardly smoked at all. Other than that, lived a very clean life. Nobody in her house ever smoked. She didn't go out to smoky bars or anything like that. And nevertheless, she has emphysema. You wouldn't know it to look at her, but she's on puffers, and this is having lived a very clean life. So, it just kind of shows the difference between my lifestyle, which severely affected the progress of alpha-1. I have to wonder, I don't know the answer to the question, but if I had known I had alpha-1 when I was young, would I have continued to smoke? Who knows? But anyway, that's my story today. I feel great. I'm full of energy. We've had some complications over the last winter that have been addressed, and I'm getting my strength back again, and life is good. That's my story.
I feel like I'm the last man out here. I'm the oddball of the group, but my name's Tom Leckie. I was born in 1964 in Sarnia, Ontario. My dad and mom picked up and left and came to Windsor in my grade 12 year, and I've been living here ever since in the area. I didn't have any issues growing up. I played sports, never knew I was sick until my early 40s, and it was slow. It was very slow. I would be tired. I'm a car salesman. I'm a sales manager now, but I was selling cars at the dealership in Windsor, and they knew I was something wrong. I would be out in my car having a sleep, and they would call my cell phone if I had a customer come in. It was getting to the point where I couldn't stay awake during the day. I'd go to watch my niece's soccer game. It was 90 degrees and full humidity, and I felt like an idiot. I had a full winter coat on, and I still was cold. So I went to the hospital. Many times in Windsor, I was kind of scared because I got the deer in the headlight look from the doctors. Nothing against our doctors here, but you always hear you got to get to London, So the last time I was in the hospital, I said, you gotta get me to London, and nothing happened. My wife called. She looked it up in the yellow pages and found Dr. Gent, who was a liver specialist in London, and she called and she cried on the answering machine, and somehow, some way, we got in to see Dr. Gent, and Dr. Gent is now retired. From what I understand in the community, he's a very, very knowledgeable man. And he did a half an hour overall check of me, took my fingers and did all kinds of things, asked me 100,000 questions, and he says, I think I know what you have. Take this blood test. And at the time, I think it was done either out west or out east in a batch. It's very expensive, he said, and but I think I know what you have. I'm not going to say yet, but anyways, it came back, and he says, I was right, you have alpha-1 antitrypsin. And he says, but yours is different. He said, normally in 99% of our cases it affects your lungs, but yours has attacked your liver. And your only cure is a liver transplant. So that's 2006. So I was in and out of the hospital in Windsor, back and forth to London. Finally was listed, getting sicker and sicker all the time. My lungs started filling up with fluid. I was at work one day, I couldn't breathe. I went to the clinic. They said, I think you have a collapsed lung. I went to Windsor, and they said, no, you have, your lungs are full of fluid. Come back and see us on Monday. You're going to have to be drained. Well, it was Halloween night. I called my dad up and said, any chance you can take me to London? That's where my doctors are now. And so Halloween night, 2010, I was taken to University Hospital in London, and I sat down in emergency. I was in within 2 minutes, and the doctor says, you're not going anywhere until you get a transplant. You're a very sick man. So I don't want to scare anybody, but I was 84 days waiting in the hospital. Total time. Spent some time on the heart floor. I could get up, walk around, and help them out, but finally I got my call for my liver transplant while I was in the hospital. So should have told you I'm married. I'm married to a beautiful woman. I have 3 lovely kids, and I would be nowhere without my wife. She drove back and forth, and if you remember, the 403 was closed in 2010 because of a winter storm. My wife was driving back and forth to Windsor through that. She's, I can't say enough about how much support I've had from her. Anyways, I was transplanted in 2010, November 28th to be exact. Surgery went well. I think I was awake. They say I was talking. I was writing. They still had the tube down me, and they had to go back in. There was an issue. They don't like going back in, but they went back in to re-hook me up to another portal vein. And everything has been very, very good since then. I'm on Prograf, Cellcept, very low, mild doses, 2 times a day. Knock on wood, I've been very helpful. I'm very healthy, I should say. I'm back to work, working too many hours, and that's my story.
We'll start the questioning with, we've got a number of ones that have come in by text. This is an interesting one. It's for Ed and Mark. And this individual says, you guys look great, but are you really? The looks can be deceiving. She'd like you to comment on whether or not you're prepared to say a few words about your transplant complications or difficulties up until now. And again, she says you look great.
So to answer that question about, we look great, are we really? Lung transplants are a big deal. Everybody reacts differently to them. Everybody has a different outcome, a longer or shorter different recovery times. And yes, there are complications. It's said that you're trading one set of problems for another, although these problems we have now are manageable. The drugs are terrible for you, the anti-rejection drugs, and Ed, I don't know about you, whether you've had many complications, but this past winter I certainly did, because I catch bugs easily. Viruses and bacteria and stuff. You just have to be so careful of that, and so as a result of that, I ended up with, I'll make a long story very short, I ended up with kidney failure twice, and in the hospital addressing that. But I'm recovering from that. Got my strength back. I feel great. Lots of energy now. And would I do it again? Absolutely. It's given me a life, and I think you other fellows with transplants can say the same thing, that before the transplant I had no life, I had nothing. I couldn't brush my teeth without being severely out of breath, and now I have a life. I carry on activities that I love doing, and so it's a fair trade. We look great, yeah. Probably because we're a hell of a lot healthier than we were before, the transplants, and feel great. You just have to deal with these things as they come along, one day at a time. But like I say, I would do it again, absolutely. It's just given me a fabulous life.
I think Mark just said a lot. They tell you going in, there's no guarantees. and you do trade one set of problems for another. In my case, I was drawing very close to the end of my life. There was that was my choice, was either I get a transplant or I don't carry on at all. So I'm way better off. And truly, yeah, I had many issues, not particularly. My immune system's compromised, so I'm careful about what I'm exposed to, and but I haven't had a lot of problems. Very fortunate, you know. But as they say, my brother also had a transplant. His outcome wasn't that great. He struggled quite a bit, but he was around for a lot longer than he would have been otherwise. So yeah, yeah. A number of people that I met in the last couple of years before transplant, meeting them after transplant, even 6 months after, they didn't know who I was. I changed that much in a better way, in a healthy way, that they didn't know who I was anymore. And it has been great. And yes, I really do feel as good as I look, because I don't look that great anymore.
I have a question for Andrew. I want to know what province he's from to get funding for augmentation therapy.
Yeah. So I'm from Ontario, and my wife, who's super supportive as well. She is a teacher. So through the teacher's health plan, I'm self-employed. But through the teacher's health plan, I'm fully covered 100%. And I think she's going to have to work forever. So.
My wife's in the same boat.
Got an interesting question. A lot of the panelists have said that they want Prolastin. Somebody wants to know if you do any traveling outside of the country, and if so, is it difficult to get your infusions when you're away, or just how do you manage that?
My husband and I go to California every year for 5 months, and the Canadian government lets me take my Prolastin with me. I have to pay for the nurse down there, but it's better to be in the heat than to be in the moist or the cold. But to answer your question, you can go anywhere. I don't go on a plane, we drive. And you can get health insurance. You get health insurance. The one we found was BCAA. Not cheap, but you can still have it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Mark, you mentioned that you go to Mexico.
Yeah, I travel with my drugs, and it's not a problem. They want you to have the containers with your name on them, the prescription and everything. And other than that, it's not a problem. I fly, and I just had nothing, no problem.
Well, actually, you raised another issue. There's a question down the list here a little bit. If anybody has any difficulties flying with oxygen, we hear a lot of horror stories. And I think that's a little bit of a pet peeve of yours, Mark.
Ed and I know about that one.
Yep.
They have come up with regulations, and I'm not up to date, but I haven't looked at it for a while. But portable oxygen concentrators, approved ones, and away you go. You can do it. It used to be, I think, more difficult because the rules weren't quite clear of what you could and couldn't do. Both Ed and I, we traveled carrying cylinders of oxygen, but now it's only the portable oxygen concentrators. I think you have to carry enough batteries to do double the duration of the expected duration of your trip, which can be a lot of batteries. But your oxygen providers assist you with that stuff, and get on the plane and away you go.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, this is a long question. Let me just figure this one out. Tom said he couldn't thank his family enough for supporting him through his illness and transplant. Have any of the patients or family members had either psychiatric or psychological help from specialists, or just kind of managed on your own?
I did. I saw a therapist for 8 years just to deal with thing about the lung disease. I too have a very supportive husband, and he's great, but I needed to deal with that for myself because that's a big thing to deal with when somebody tells you that your life is going to change. Nobody knows anything, and you have to deal with that. So I chose to see a therapist, and it did help.
Oh, thank you. Ed, I saw you waving your hand.
Yeah, I know, and I can't say I saw a therapist before the transplant, before the whole transplant process. Although it probably is a very good idea, as I said before, that getting the diagnosis and being told that this will end your life, was a really traumatic event that could have used a little help to get through that. Honestly, I probably would have dealt with it better. But during the transplant process, they're very aware of the psychological and social issues around disease itself and about transplant, and they're very supportive about that. And I as well have a tremendously supportive wife and family, which is crucial, and crucial when you're when you have a disease like this for anyone. I think is that you need that support every day, more some days than others.
Absolutely.
Anybody else want to comment on that one? Okay, everybody seems to be interested in transplants today. We've got another question. Ed said that he was at 10% lung function when he had his transplant. Mark, where were you?
Under 20. I was under 20%.
Can I ask a question? How old are all of you? The ones that had the transplants.
I'm 59 now. I was 57 when I had the transplant.
Okay. And Mark?
I was 62 when I got mine. I get my OAS next month.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, here's another question from the audience. This is for Ken. What's your lung function at this time on prolactin, and what is the drug amount you get in milligrams per kilogram?
My lung function right now is in the 59 to 60% FEV1. The amount of drug you get depends on your weight. And so I've been taking 4,000 milligrams weekly.
Yeah, I think that was just a tricky way to ask how much you weigh. Okay, well, now what does this one say? Oh, I think a lot of you mentioned this, but maybe we could just get everybody to go through the list. And how long did it take to actually get diagnosed from when the symptoms started until the diagnosis?
For me, are we going through the list?
Sure. Yeah, sure, Alice. You go first.
Well, for me, from the diagnosis, probably 15 years.
Ken?
I was 2 years.
Andrew?
Probably about the same, around 2 years. Maybe a bit longer from the first time I noticed symptoms, but when I started engaging doctors, around 2 years.
And Ed?
Mine, I was very quick because my brother had been diagnosed, but it took him 5 years, and I don't know how many doctors he went through to get a proper diagnosis. It was a long time. But for me, I just had to go and tell the doctor what I had.
Right.
So.
Tom? Tom's microphone seems to be... asked it. Tom, can you unmute your microphone? Oh.
It's
Sorry,
unmuted now.
oh, okay.
2 years, but I'm not blaming anything on the hospitals in Windsor, but I think I would have been diagnosed a lot quicker if I was in London. That's just saying that they're more familiar with this disease, and I'm sure that it's changing as time goes on. So.
And last but not least, Mark.
I was diagnosed pretty quickly. I remember the doctor saying to me, lots of people who smoked for 30 years, Mark, they don't have the kind of lung damage you do. And he knew what he was looking for. So it was, pretty quick.
Well, those numbers obviously are outrageous, but I have to tell you that Health One Canada did a study back in 2003 and found closer to an average of 2008, I think, 10 years. So I guess things are improving. There's got a long way to go, but still, okay. Let me find another question.
Jim, I wanted to mention that for years, every time I went to the hospital or a health care facility, it was always a re-education of the staff of what Alpha One was. Every time it was, what is this you have, and what is that, and the doctor would disappear for an hour while he researched what this was about. But in the last couple of years before transplant, I actually came up with young doctors in emergency rooms that knew what I was talking about, that had received some training on alpha-1 antitrypsin, and it wasn't a complete mystery to them when you said that's what, this is what I have and this is what's probably going on with me. So it is improving. I believe things are improving that way.
Okay, whoops. There we go. We've got a question from Etsy. Does anyone have a port? If so, how often does the needle get taken out?
No.
I had a port. I had a number of ports. Was accessed every week for my prolactin.
Right.
I had, I guess, for about 10 years, 11 years. And it was like the needles was put in for my infusion and then taken out every time. So it was re-accessed every week. So I don't know if that helps or not.
What about Ken and Mark? Or Ken first.
No, in my case, the nurse just finds a vein in my arms, and I haven't had a problem so far.
Me too.
And Mark.
No, I haven't had to. I didn't have prolactin or anything like that. So.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, I'm sort of misunderstood. Okay, I know the answer to this question, but I guess the audience doesn't. Has anyone been on a clinical trial? And how hard is it emotionally to always wonder if you're getting the real thing or I think that you can.
I guess I wasn't on augmentation therapy before I went in the trial, so to me, I had a 50-50 chance of being on the good side, so it didn't bother me that much. I was lucky that I ended up on the real stuff, but there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to deal with it, and I was lucky.
Okay, now let's go. Oh, we have a live question. Tracy has her hand up. Just a minute. Okay, Tracy, if your microphone's working, you should be able to ask your question. Tracy? Not there.
Okay, Tracy actually typed in a question already.
Oh, thanks, Duncan. You want to go ahead and ask it?
The question was, maybe it was something that was answered in the introduction, but it was missed. But what genetic variable? Tracy, are you on? Is your microphone on? Tracy? All right. All right, looks like Tracy just went offline. Okay. My guess is they're asking if everyone here are ZZs.
Yes, I do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. I guess that answers our question. Back to you, Jim.
Thanks, Duncan. So that seems to be the end of the questions from the audience. I know we've focused quite a bit on transplants, and I guess that's understandable. But how important is it to be sort of mentally prepared as well as physically prepared for the actual transplant? Like what, are there programs you go through, or just how does that work? Sorry to the rest of you, but Mark and Ed.
Well, and Tom too, I guess.
Oh, right.
I'm not sure that I don't know of any program that's available for people who might be in that situation. Most of us don't plan on it. I guess in some cases we're fortunate to know that may be in our future. I was, and Mark was, he says, so I guess I was fortunate that I had a brother that I watched and saw things happening to him. Certainly wasn't, we didn't have the same experience by a long shot, but I think that's something that if it's in your future, you'd look at the information that is available online. There is actually quite a lot. There are some books about experiences. There's manuals from hospitals that are shared online that you can look at what their programs look like and some things like that. There are lots of resources. Alpha One, I know, Alpha One Canada. AlphaNet is another resource that it could be available to that to talk about. There's lots of places to look and see where you could get information. Or most of us, I think, are not don't mind speaking to someone about the experience or talking to their family or whatever.
Yeah, Mark, did you want to say something?
Well, I was going to add something that from something Ed talked about a while ago about support. I think Ed and Ken and Tom talked about the support of family through the transplant thing. And if someone is looking at a transplant in the future, you need to know that it's probably the toughest thing you will do, and it's tough on everybody around you. It's a hard thing to do. It's emotional. It's time consuming. There's money involved, even with our health insurance. There are other expenses, and the whole thing is tough on everybody. And so knowing that it's going to be tough going into it, I think it really, really helps. It would help people because, boy, if you're not prepared for it being tough, and all of a sudden, holy mackerel, we have all this stuff to do. And the person, the patient, needs that support. I mean, you're not going to get a transplant without it, and you're not, and rightfully so, because you're not going to be able to look after yourself for a while. And so, yeah, it's really tough, and that support and understanding from family or close friends or whoever it is you have is really key to making it through that whole thing.
Okay, we're going to try another live question, but just before we do, somebody missed it. Tom, did you say you were ZZ as well?
I was just going to say the same thing. It's I don't know if there's enough time to look for help. It's the family kind of surround you after the fact. It's a matter of getting your life back in order. Much like Andrew at the time, I was self-employed, and it's expensive because there's no money coming in. But there are after the transplant, you'll have a coordinator that will help you. There's ways to find money, places that will help you out. But again, it comes as quickly as possible, maybe a little bit too soon, but you know, when no one's paying your bills, you do whatever you can to get back to work. So that's all I wanted to say is family is number one.
Okay, and are you a ZZ as well?
Say that again?
A ZZ, ZZ, or whatever. Sorry, my father's American, my mom's Canadian.
I'm sorry, it's hard to hear the question.
Sorry, your phenotype, is it ZZ?
My phenotype?
Phenotype.
Phenotype.
I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
Never been brought up.
Really?
I guess I'm different because it's not my lungs, right? It's my liver, so.
Right. Okay, we have a question from Sandy. Sandy, I've unmuted your microphone, so you should be able to ask. Sandy, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
So I'm Andrew's sister, and hi Andrew, and I don't have alpha-1. I drew the lucky card in terms of the genetics, but I'm curious to know, Andrew struggled as a young adult with colitis, and I understand his physician to say that it could be related to his alpha-1 condition, and I'm wondering, when he had to go through significant surgeries for that, did anyone else have some other health issues in conjunction with their alpha-1?
No, not me. I just had asthma.
Good question. I didn't really have any major issues beside my lungs, really.
Same here. Yeah.
I went through a bout of what they classified as irritable bowel syndrome because they didn't know what it was, but I never thought of it. Andrew, maybe it has something to do with the disease, but mine went away on its own. I didn't have to have any surgeries done, but I did have the symptoms for it. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I had gone down to Toronto General and saw the transplant surgeon there, and she seemed to think that all of my issues are all under the alpha-1, an effective alpha-1. And anyway, back 9 years ago, I had a diagnosis of colon cancer. And at that time, they told me I had 3 to 5 years to live because it was third stage or whatever. And all you hear is 3 years. So, you know, being on the clock like that really changes you. But it turned out not to be. It was cell dysplasia, so I didn't have to have any further treatment after they took out my colon. So, you know, what resonates with me with this thing is that was a death sentence, right? This is a life sentence. It's just a change in your life. It's not necessarily, you're not on the clock. There's no end date. So you just got to figure out, you know, what you got to do to make things better as best as you can, and certainly exercise and diet and family and all the things everybody else is mentioning is super important. Like I blew out my ACL. I'd like to tell you it was training for my next MMA fight or when I was skydiving, but the fact of the matter is I was just jumping out of my boat in the driveway and blew out my ACL right after my diagnosis. So I couldn't really move around that much, and I put on some weight in that. But once I started rehab and got back going again, I've lost like, I don't know, 15 pounds and feel really a lot better. So I think for anybody who's, affected, whether it's majorly affected or maybe, I don't know, I kind of put my head in the sand like Tom. I have no idea what my phenotype is. I'm just trying to make sure that I stay positive and look after myself as best as I can, because we're super busy around here.
Andrew, I think you're right about the exercise part. Even before transplants or any stage, and of course anybody, you are going to feel a lot better if you're in shape. The best shape you can be in, and if you have to go through surgery, major surgery, liver transplant, lung transplant, you're going to come through that surgery an awful lot better the better shape you're in. Mine, I left it too long before I got my lung transplant and was in bad shape. My legs had atrophied, and it was tougher for me coming out of that transplant. It took me an awful lot longer to get leg strength back and everything like that. So yeah, being in shape, keeping your weight down, eating right, exercising every day. You have to get some kind of exercise, and it makes life an awful lot better.
Yeah, like for me, I know when I first got back on my bike, I'm not much of a runner, so it took me 22 minutes to do this route, and surprisingly, within about 2 weeks, I had it down to 16 or 15 minutes, and now I'm up to about a 10K bike ride. So as long as it's flat, please don't make me go. No hills.
Can you live in Barrie?
Yeah.
Okay.
It gets to the point with the exercising that I don't feel right if I don't get some exercise in a day. It just doesn't feel right. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing is that Andrew said was keeping a positive attitude. That's also really a key. There are so many ways to get down about this, especially a diagnosis that tells you this is the rest of your life kind of thing. But staying on top of that and keeping your attitude on the positive side and looking for the positives always makes everything much easier to deal with, and it will keep your body in better shape too.
Sure does. I sort of felt, pre-transplant when I was getting sicker and sicker, that, boy, there was a lot of things that I couldn't do. But you know what? There was a whole lot of things I could do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you do them. And it's that positive attitude that, you just don't want to roll over and die. Yeah.
Right. Okay, I have another question here, and I think we're a little bit after 12 now, and we sort of had scheduled this for an hour. So if anybody's been thinking about asking a question, this would be a good time to either put up your hand or put it in the chat box, because as far as I can tell, this looks like our last question, and it's, does anyone take prednisone along with their antibiotics on a regular basis?
Yes.
First time an exacerbation, or does anyone take an antibiotic daily or regularly?
Yes.
Yes.
Did they mean like if you get sick?
What, during exacerbation? Yeah.
Yes, yeah, I do too.
I did it. I took prednisone for quite a while before the transplant. Probably about 3 years after an exacerbation, I kind of weaned it down. But whenever I would go off it, and then within a couple of weeks, I'd be in trouble again. And so my respirologist decided it'd be better if I just kept on it a little bit. And actually, about 2 weeks before the transplant, I'd finally weaned myself off again and said, well, let's try this again. And then I had the transplant, and of course, that's part of the pharmacology, routine after the transplant is I'm on prednisone regularly now.
How many milligrams do you do, Ed?
I'm on 10 every other day now.
Okay. No.
And pre-transplant for a number of years, I was on zithromycin 3 times a week, probably for 5 or 6 years, as a prosthetic thing.
Yeah, I do that now, zithromycin 3 times a week, prednisone 10 milligrams daily. Also, there's another one, I forget the name of it, but it's part of the deal.
Yep.
Yeah.
I did find that the azithromycin prior to transplant reduced the number of exacerbations,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I don't see any hands raised. And oh, wait a minute. I'm a female and I'm constantly having UTI infections. Could alpha-1 be the reason? We're not doctors here. I don't know, and I don't suspect any of the panelists do either.
Don't know. I've never heard that.
What did she say?
Having UTI infections could alpha-1 be?
No, I wouldn't think so.
I think what we can do is ask some of these questions to our medical advisory board and get back to some of these people.
Yeah, so if you logged in with your real email address, we can do that for you, and of course we will. So I guess this concludes our Ask the Patients webinar today. Don't forget we have another one in a couple hours at, I'm not sure we're all time zones, but it's at 1 o'clock Eastern time with some caregivers. So on behalf of Alpha-1 Canada, I want to thank everyone for being here and contributing and participating. You've all been great. Don't forget to complete the survey when you leave the webinar. It's just short and it won't take long. Having said that, it will get emailed to you later anyway, so you can do it then as well. But it's really your feedback that's going to help us to make the next sessions better than this one and as good as they can be. And for those who haven't watched any of the videos that we posted on our website this week, there's about 10 videos up there with people like Dr. Chapman talking about the asthma COPD overlap syndrome. We have a series of 3 videos about the 3 organizations that help alphas here in Canada, with Alpha-1 Canada, AlphaNet, and the Alpha-1 Canadian Registry. There's also something there about by Jane Duke about clinical trials and the decision that people make to get involved. And a really good presentation by Dr. Ron Gibson, who is not only a psychiatrist, but he also teaches new psychiatrists and also has Alpha-1. And he talks about a lot of really good coping mechanisms and ways to get the right amount of sleep and so on without having to use pills or so on. And there was a number of videos there. They were all less than half an hour or so. And we've still got 2 more to add that aren't there yet, but we'll do later this weekend, and that's with a financial consultant named Chad McFedrin, who's going to talk about both end-of-life planning and as well as,
disability.
Yeah, exactly. Tax planning and the disability tax credit and so on. So, again, thank you very much for attending. Please fill out the survey for us, and don't forget to watch those videos. So again, have a wonderful day, and until next time, take care and be healthy.